All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock, and we're going to start this Enterprise Green Communities Criterion Certification webinar. My name is Krista Egger. I'm Senior Director of National Initiatives here at Enterprise and oversee our Green Communities program, and I'll be leading you through today's session. So thanks so much for joining. I'm excited to spend some time with you all. If you've just logged on, if you could, on the right side of your screen within the polling section, answer the 2 questions there. That'll help us understand who's on the line today, and we'll look at the results of that poll in just a few minutes, but thanks for taking a look at that. We will be recording today's session, and we'll be circulating a copy of the slides and the audio recording to everyone who registered for this webinar within the next week. So keep an eye out for that. You'll be able to forward that on to your colleagues as well. During today's session, I'll be pausing for questions 3 times. So as you think of them, go ahead and type in your questions into the Q&A or the chat section on the right side of your screen. And when we get to those 3 breaks for Q&A, I'll read through the questions that I've accumulated and answer those right away. So please don't hesitate to write anything there, but hold on a little bit for answers until we get to those Q&A breaks. Today's webinar is going to focus on the 2015 Enterprise Green Communities criteria. We're going to provide you with an overview of the standard and with techniques to ensure your projects, whether they're new construction or retrofit projects, are adhering with these latest best practices in sustainability. Specific attention will be paid to critical details to consider during design as well as construction and the process of certification itself. So by the end of today's session, you should be able to describe the 2015 Enterprise Green Communities criteria as it applies to your project. You should be able to identify the steps required of Green Communities certification, and you should be able to identify resources to assist with meeting your sustainability goals. So thanks again for attending today. Now that the poll has closed, I'm going to pull up the results. And share those with you all. All right. It's going to take another minute or 2 for us to be able to look at these poll results, but thanks to those of you who did fill that out in the beginning. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and look at the agenda for today's session. So for the next hour, we'll be spending our time on these 4 topics. So I'll spend a little bit of time with you just giving you an introduction to Enterprise and Enterprise Green Communities. Then I'll share the bulk of the time with you going through highlights of our 2015 Enterprise Green Communities criteria, which is the current and active standard. And then we'll spend a little bit of time at the end talking about how a project can earn certification to the criteria. And then I'll close with showing you a few different resources that are available to you as you pursue your certification journey with your project. And we'll have time for Q&A after each of these sections. So thanks again for joining. Let me start by sharing with those of you all who aren't familiar with Enterprise Community Partners a little bit about our organization. We're a national nonprofit based in Columbia, Maryland. We've been around about 35 years. I like to start off all of our sessions with a quote from our founder, Mr. Jim Rouse. And the quote here says, "We believe, because it is true, that people are affected by their environment, by space and scale, by color and texture, by nature and beauty, that they can be uplifted, made to feel important." Mr. Rouse was a prolific real estate developer who created the Enterprise Foundation, now known as Enterprise Community Partners, upon his retirement from his earlier career in 1980. And Enterprise today is focused on increasing the quantity and improving the quality of affordable housing nationwide. We work to bring together people and resources needed to create affordable housing in strong neighborhoods through policy advocacy, through deploying capital, and through programmatic solutions. And To date, we've invested more than $18.6 billion in this arena, helped create more than 340,000 homes, and touched millions of lives. Our Enterprise Green Communities initiative is one of the programs in which Enterprise is active nationally. We launched our Enterprise Green Communities program almost 15 years ago now. It was back in 2004. And since then, we've been part of a national effort to ensure that people living in affordable housing are healthier than if they were living in standard-built homes, that they spend less money on utilities, and that they have more opportunities through their connections to transportation, quality food, and health services. The hub of our work in the Green Communities Initiative at Enterprise is based on our work with the Enterprise Green Communities criteria and the certification surrounding that criteria. And to date, we have certified affordable housing projects in 43 states and the District of Columbia. We have more than 128,000 units active in our pipeline. And in Ohio in particular, we've certified 168 projects, which encompass 8,569 units. So we have a long track record of working in the state of Ohio, and are glad you're here with us today. Certification to our criteria is only available for affordable housing or for mixed income or mixed use properties. And slight variations in our criteria allow appropriate nuance, whether your project is single family or multifamily, whether it's new construction or rehab, and whether it's located in an urban or a rural location. The 8 icons that you see here represent the different categories of our 2015 criteria. Collectively, they reflect an ambitious yet achievable framework. It's a holistic framework. You cannot take any one of these out and still have what we would consider a green building. We have designed these criterion and categories to be appropriate for the affordable housing market. We start off with category 1, which is at the top of your screen, integrative design. Then we move to location and neighborhood fabric, which is about determining where your project is located in terms of environmental sensitivity. Then we move to site improvements, then water conservation, energy efficiency, materials, then healthy living environment, which touches on issues related to design, construction, and operations that impact the health outcomes of the residents living in your properties. And then finally, our last criteria category is operations, maintenance, and resident engagement. And ideally, what you learn from operating or living in your properties will then influence the next property that you work on in the integrative design section. So it's a holistic cycle here. And in just a few minutes, I'll go into more detail on each of these 8 categories, providing you some examples of the criterion within each as well. In order to certify to our program, you must meet all of the mandatory criteria, and there are mandatory criteria in all of the 8 categories of the program, and then you must achieve a certain number of optional points. If you're a new construction property, that you must meet at least 35 optional points. If you're undergoing a rehab of an existing building, the bar is slightly lower, and we're looking for at least 30 optional points. In just a few minutes, I'll be going through the details of the criteria and then the certification program, but after today's webinar, if you'd like to learn more about anything I'm speaking about today, or if you'd like to look at our FAQ on the criteria, or our addenda, or access templates related to submitting your certification applications, you can go to our website, the address of which you see on your screen here. If you then click on the picture box on the left of your screen, you'll learn more about the Green Communities criteria. Or if you click the picture box on the right side of your screen when you're online, you'll learn more about the certification process, and you'll be able to access our actual certification portal. Let me show you a little bit about what is available on the Green Communities criteria page first, though. So on this page, you'll be viewing something that looks very similar to what you're seeing on your screen right now. You'll be able to access a PDF of the full criteria manual, which includes the requirements, the rationale, recommendations, and resources for every criteria in our manual. You'll also be able to access a PDF of a short version of that manual, just the criteria checklist, which is easier to use in the manual if you want a quick reference of the program. And then you'll also be able to access our FAQ and addenda, which includes slight changes to the criteria that we've released since it was originally published. And then that 2015 criteria ambassador brief at the bottom of your screen includes some additional information about how the criteria was developed, if you'd like to share that with your stakeholders. On the other hand, if you would like to learn more about certification and you click that picture box, you'll go to a page that looks like this, and you'll be able to see information about eligibility for projects, supplemental document instructions, which is the third hyperlink on your screen, which is one of the most critical fields on the website because it tells you exactly what's needed to upload and accompany your certification application. And then the bullet points near the bottom of the screen here include different templates for different attachments that will be required when you submit a project for certification. We'll be going through the process of certification at the end of this webinar, so don't worry about that too much now. Just recognize that this criteria and certification page are available to you for more information and resources about accessing information about the 2015 Enterprise Green Communities criteria. So that's it for the intro section, a little bit about enterprise and green communities. I'm going to see if there are any Q&A or chat questions so far, and if not, we'll move right into the technical material. All right, not seeing anything, so we'll proceed. All right. An integrative design process takes a holistic approach to project planning and design and incorporates input from all project team members and a variety of property stakeholders, including residents and community members. And that's what the first category of our criteria is all about. Experienced practitioners recognize that an integrated design and delivery process can lower development costs and encourage health, economic, and environmental benefits for both residents and property owners. But we also know that the time constraints and limited resources that are part of every affordable housing deal sometimes prevent teams from spending as much time on this integrative design process as they might otherwise. So, and it can be a challenge to prioritize in some instances, but the benefits that we've seen from projects that do invest time and resources in an integrative design process before construction begins prove out in lower construction costs and improved project performance attributes. So taking the time to really thoughtfully develop a planning process while keeping in mind the outcomes that you'd like from your project from the very beginning will really help you set up accountability within your team and help you successfully implement your project goals throughout your timeline and save time and resources at the end. This slide that you're seeing here contains the names of all of the criteria in this category, both mandatory and optional. The first three, the 1.1 section, speaks to the broader planning process of the project, and they prescribe different steps for an outcome-based design process. The latter criteria, the 1.2s and the 1.3s, ask project teams to examine their specific resident populations and local characteristics through the lens of health for the 1.2s or resilience for the 1.3s, using data and community information to employ strategies in support of those disciplines. So really encouraging teams to go above and beyond the fundamentals of integrative design and work with professionals in these categories to promote positive resident health outcomes and property resilience. Perhaps the most critical Category 1 criterion for teams to understand and execute is the very first one, criterion 11A, goal setting, in order to ensure that the project team allocates time and resources necessary to develop a living plan to guide the life cycle of the project and enable teams to reach their desired green building goals. Integrative design and criterion 11A represents a common theme that threads together all of the criteria categories that we'll be going through today, maximizing the efficiency and effectiveness of the project. For criterion 11A goal setting, you see the snapshot of the requirement on your screen here. We are not going to be judging the quality or the substance necessarily of your project goals. What we are looking for is to ensure that you have set goals for the project in a holistic manner, and we will evaluate that by looking at answers to these 3 questions. So simply, do you have a statement of your overall green development goals? Do you have a summary of the integrative process that was used to create those? And then do you have a description of how progress and success against those goals will be measured? So that's a quick overview of the first category of the 2015 criteria. We'll move along to the next category. Locating a project within an existing neighborhood and in close proximity to infrastructure, transportation, and services contributes to the quality of life and opportunities available to residents. It adds to the vitality of the community, so we would like to encourage this whenever possible. This slide illustrates a sample of the mandatory and the optional criteria that contribute to that community vitality. And because we work with both new construction and rehab projects in this criteria, the program is tailored to accommodate the inherent different implications of sites and communities in those 2 different locations. So we have different compliance pathways for new construction and rehabs and for rural and urban properties. Rehab projects specifically are not required to meet the mandatory measures in this category, but there may be opportunities for rehab projects to still earn optional points for certain Category 2 criteria when they're well suited to comply, and we certainly encourage that. Further, while new construction projects are required to meet all the mandatory criteria in this category, we've built in flexibility to our criterion 2.8, access to public transportation, which is required of all new construction properties, but we've built in some flexibility to allow multiple compliance pathways listed here. So instead of complying with our criterion 2.8 verbatim, for instance, you could acquire an equivalent number of points through pursuing these other criteria in this section that are up on your screen here. So essentially, given the wide range of considerations for all of the neighborhood settings where projects pursuing certification are cited, it's helpful to review this section in particular if you have a new construction property early on in your planning to understand the appropriate pathway. Moving on to Category 3, the criteria that focus on the project site ask teams to both build in a manner that's sensitive to the environment and the ecological elements of the site, and also to take advantage of opportunities presented on the site to employ additional strategies to further the sustainable benefits of the particular property. So, for instance, the first 4 criterion on this slide are mandatory for applicable building sites, whereas the last 3 promote creative strategies to manage water on the site and reduce the heat island effect, which can also reduce cooling loads for the project, decreasing energy consumption. So before your construction crew breaks ground on a new construction or a rehab property, remember to consult this category for green building opportunities to ensure your project meets these environmental requirements. We don't get many questions about criterion in Category 3 from properties in Ohio or around the country generally. So this is a category that many teams are already fairly familiar with the content of. So not a heavy list for most properties, but please do consult it and reach out if you do have any questions before your project moves along too far. So moving on to the 4th category, You know, while the previous category, while Category 3 included strategies for managing water on the site, this category, water conservation, focuses on water use within the building. So this slide in particular also includes the names of all of the criterion in this category, both mandatory and optional. It's a small but mighty category. And we know that water conservation translates into direct utility savings for residents and building owners and conserves a precious natural resource. And saving this utility is particularly relevant as we're seeing water utility prices rise all across the country. And while we require all projects to ensure their fixtures in the building meet certain usage specifications for criterion 4.1, water conserving fixtures, this category does present pathways for all projects to go above and beyond those requirements to further reduce dependence on this natural resource. And for instance, this is an example of another pathway that you can use that's particularly relevant for rehabs of existing buildings. We designed some flexibility into criterion 4.1 and 4.2, the two criterion about water conserving fixtures, to enable rehab properties in particular to meet our water use reduction targets by alternative means. So rather than installing the specific fixture ratings for all of the fixtures in your property, which might require you to replace water fixtures that may have been installed in the recent past. Instead of doing that, if you'd like, you can follow this addenda to the criteria, which gives some guidance about keeping some older plumbing fixtures as long as the whole apartment or whole building water usage does not exceed a certain amount. And we have a calculator online that you can use to plug in your fixture spec levels to determine whether you meet that overall threshold that's acceptable or not. And as a reminder, the addenda document to our criteria, which includes this snapshot that you're seeing here, is available on our criteria homepage that we showed you the website link to just a moment ago. We'll now move into Category 5. Our approach to project energy performance is ensuring that buildings operate with minimum energy consumption for improved resident comfort, reduced energy costs, and a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. This category includes criteria specifically targeting energy savings through lighting and appliance specification, for instance, but criterion 5.1 in this category, building performance standard, often is the greatest lift for project teams. It's focused on demonstrating a project's overall energy efficiency, inclusive of all the components that make up the energy load of the project. And to accommodate the different building and construction types submitted for certification, there are 4 compliance pathways offered for this measure, that the titles of which you can see on your screen, A, B, C, and D here. Essentially, new construction projects are able to comply with 5.1 by certifying to ENERGY STAR. And rehab projects, we're looking for project teams to demonstrate performance with an energy model, to ASHRAE or appropriate HERS ratings. The key here is that meeting this complex criterion, which is mandatory of all projects, necessitates that project teams engage with an energy professional or a HERS rater early on in the planning and throughout construction to ensure that your project is designed and built to meet the appropriate performance standard. This criterion 5.1 within this category is absolutely critical to focus on as part of your integrative design process that we touched on in Category 1. The resources cited here, those 2 web links you see at the bottom of your screen, can be used to connect project teams with raters or energy professionals in their area. If you're a project team that does not already have a strong relationship with a HERS rater, you can go to either this ENERGY STAR or ResNet hot link to search for raters that are near you, and we really encourage that teams build a relationship with an energy professional that's able to serve as a resource throughout the life of the project and provide helpful input for meeting your goals rather than just serving as a pass-fail. We really encourage the HERS rater to become part of your core team. So I'll move on from that, but happy to answer questions about that criterion certainly a little bit later on. We'll move on into category 6. So this category, materials, is concentrated on both what materials go into the building, but also how material waste from the building is managed. So specifying sustainable materials for a project and recycling and reusing construction materials can improve conditions for residents that impact health, increase the project lifespan, as well as reduce waste and encourage the preservation of precious natural resources. This slide provides a cross-section of the criteria that contribute to this category, and they're focused on various desired outcomes. The mix of mandatory and optional standards for incorporating and managing materials ensures our projects are meeting appropriate industry standards for green building materials, and also allows for some easy wins for project teams to intensify their compliance with mandatory materials for optional plants. So for instance, Green Communities prohibits the installation of carpet in slab-on-grade conditions, which is known to trap moisture and can exacerbate the collection of dust and other allergens in the air harmful for breathing. But teams can go above and beyond that standard and forego installing carpet entirely and be eligible for optional points, which will also ensure a better environment for residents. So that's just one example of a mandatory and optional criterion pair that's in this category. Moving on to the next and the last category, healthy living environments. This category includes varying strategies intended to both improve the physical quality of the living space inside dwelling units and building common areas, as well as to promote healthy activities within those spaces. Not all Category 7 criteria are listed on this slide, but these selections can show you a range of different approaches taken to encourage healthy living environments. For instance, installing sufficient fans for compliance with 7.1 ventilation in kitchens and sealing off areas of combustion to mitigate toxic contaminants, as well as specifying efficient bath fans to effectively filter moisture and odors from the air contributes to healthier and energy and cost-efficient homes that are more comfortable for residents. Criterion 7.12, active design, on the other hand, asks project teams to design circulation paths or staircases within their project in a way that promotes resident physical activity, encouraging either more frequent or longer duration of physical activity, which is a resident health outcome associated with many benefits. And although it's seemingly straightforward, this active design measure proves time and time again to stump project teams that are coming through a certification pathway, particularly when these design elements aren't incorporated at the conception of a project. So we understand that active design and building systems included in this category require planning and project resources. So really encourage teams to review these strategies thoroughly with your design team and engineers from the start. And feel free also to reach out to our team with any questions on recommended strategies or additional resources. So happy to talk through that more with anybody on the line today. So Category 8 might be where the rubber meets the road at the end of the green building process, where residents are really able to link the sustainable features of the building to the health, economic, and environmental outcomes, as well as where residents and property operators play an active role in those benefits. So this slide includes all the criteria in the O&M and resident engagement category. The first 4 criteria, in a general sense, ask that project teams supply information and tools for residents and property managers to properly maintain green building systems and further resident cohesion. The last 2, 8.5 and 8.6, on the other hand, provide an opportunity for property operators to learn about their building performance that can inform property maintenance procedures and capital planning. We have tools to assist with all of these on our website, and I'll show you a link to where those live a little bit later. But for instance, with the building maintenance manual, emergency maintenance manual, and resident manual, we're not expecting you to create manuals from scratch. We have some great templates available on our website that you can customize, add your logo, add relevant, salient project information to use in your application and build off of some of the good work that other project teams have done in the past. So that'll be it for a very quick run-through of an overview of the 8 different categories in our 2015 criteria. Hope this is a helpful overview of the central themes there with illustrations of some of the key strategies. So I'll pause here for questions to see if anyone would like to ask anything specific about any of the criterion categories or the criterion themselves, and then I'll move on to talk about the certification process. All right, not seeing any Q&A at this time, so I'll go ahead and move on. But if you do think of a question, please feel free to enter it in the box on the right side of your screen, and I'll get to that at the end of the next section. All right, so now we are at application. So how do you actually put all of the strategies that we've touched on in the previous slides together in a project, and how do you show others involved with your property that you've successfully incorporated all of these criteria into your project for the benefit of your residents and the environment. For green communities, we have 2 stages to certification. So the enterprise team reviews project applications at the pre-build stage, which occurs prior to construction, and then at the post-build stage, which should occur within 60 days of construction completion. We do not charge for either of these reviews, but they both must be completed in order to actually receive eventual project certification. So for instance, we will not do a post-build review for a project that did not receive a successful pre-build review prior to construction began. Let me remind you where you can get access to our certification portal, which is built into our website. So if you go to the web address that you see here, click on the certification icon, and then click on it one more time, you'll be brought into our certification portal. If you've never logged onto our portal before, you'll be brought up to a screen that looks like the box on your left, where you'll simply create an account to be able to log in with your email address and a password that you create. And then, assuming you do have a login account for our system, when you do log in, you'll see a listing of all of the project applications that you're associated with in our system. So those projects may be in various stages. They may just be shells that you've started creating that haven't worked on much, or they could be ones that you've submitted for pre-build review, or they could be pre-build approved or post-build approved, et cetera. But you'll be able to log in here to see the stage or the status of each of those projects in our system once you have an account. When you are ready to actually create a project, you will answer a few simple questions to get going. You'll start with this page, and you'll need to select at the top the correct certification template. It will be the Certification Workbook 2015 for all projects that are not in New York City, or the New York City overlay if you are in New York City. And then you'll select construction type, so either new construction, substantial rehab, or moderate rehab. And then based on your answers to these 2 questions, all of the criteria that you'll be asked about later on in your application will be filtered to only reflect what's relevant for that particular type. So if you select moderate rehab, for instance, you will not be faced with any of the criteria that are only relevant for new construction. Please make sure you do select the correct button for each of these two questions here. If you make a mistake and, for instance, select new construction when you should have selected mod rehab, we are not able to do anything on our end with the certification platform to correct that for you. You would need to start a new application with the correct construction type selection. So just pause for a moment, make sure you're selecting the correct type before you move on. Once you do move on, you'll move into the project overview section, which includes some information about basic logistics for your project. For instance, address, number of buildings, number of units, and particular construction detail information. Then you'll move into the intended methods section of your application, which looks very similar to our criteria checklist. And for each of the mandatory measures and each of the optional criteria you're pursuing, you'll indicate to us how you'll be pursuing that criteria. What strategies will you be using to comply with that particular criteria? And then there's a section of the application for you to upload various documents to further confirm that you're meeting those intended methods of the criteria. So every project in their pre-build application will upload a site plan, a context map, an energy modeling form, and outlines for those three manuals that I reviewed in Category 8 for building maintenance, emergency maintenance, and resident engagement. Project teams may also need to upload additional documents depending on what other optional criterion they've selected within their application. And more information about all of these required uploads, including what are we looking for instance, on the context map or the site plan, are located in that supplemental document instructions file that I pointed out on our certification webpage. But these are the things that you should be expected to prepare in advance of your pre-build application. When you're ready to submit it, you hit submit, and then it goes into our certification review team's queue, and our team will get back to you in 30 days or less with a response. You'll either get a response that says your pre-build application has been approved, or you'll get a response saying, we need some additional information to be able to tell whether or not you're actually in compliance or not with certain criterion. When we do issue those requests for additional information, we try to be as specific as possible about the type of feedback that we need from you in order to make a final decision. So we'll indicate which criterion we have questions about and what type of question we have, et cetera. And then when you're ready, you can go back into the portal and edit your application based on our query, and then submit again for a re-review. And whether you're submitting for the first time or you're submitting after, you're resubmitting a project after it's been reviewed by your team, all of those projects go into the same queue and feedback will be returned within 30 days. So in a nutshell, that's the pre-build process. And that happens prior to construction. So when you're actually going through the construction process, you will be coordinating with that energy professional throughout your build to ensure that the property is built appropriately, framed appropriately, insulated appropriately, et cetera, and different performance tests will be done depending on the type of project that you have. At the end of your construction process, when you're ready to come back and submit for our post-build stage of Green Community Certification, you'll go back into our certification portal, you'll open up that application that you started at the pre-build stage for the particular project, and essentially you'll update information for us so that we can determine whether or not the as-built version of your property can be certified, because we were really evaluating the designed version rather than the as-built version at the pre-build stage. So at this post-build stage of certification, You'll answer questions about all of the criterion that you were pursuing, and you'll upload some other documents. So all projects are required to upload project photos in a photo release form. The final Category 8 manuals, you will allow enterprise access to an online benchmarking platform, which will be tracking the utility expenditures of your property. And then other supplemental documents might be necessary depending on which other optional criterion you're pursuing. But every project will upload the photos and release the 8 documents, the Category 8 documents, the utility access, if nothing else. When you hit submit for that stage, it will go into our certification review team's queue, and again, we'll get back to you within 30 days. If we're able to approve it, your property will officially be Green Communities certified, and we'll share with you information about how to receive a plaque that will acknowledge the achievement of that work on your property. Or you'll get a request for additional information email, which means that we weren't able to approve your project, but if you respond to our feedback, we'll likely be able to get to that stage if you resubmit. If you look at the text at the bottom of the screen, we have some information about deadlines. So as I mentioned, all submittals are reviewed within 30 days. If you all are hoping to be able to provide OFA with a proof of pre-build approval for their September 28th deadline for their LIHTC competitive round this year, we are asking you to submit your pre-build application to us no later than August 10th, so that we'll have plenty of time to do the review and potentially a re-review in advance of that September 28th deadline. So please keep an eye on the calendar for that if you're in that competitive OFA LIHTC round this year. So this, again, is that same screenshot I showed you at the top of the hour about where you can find resources regarding the certification process. I'll just bring your attention again to that supplemental document instructions hyperlink, which includes specifics about what we need to see from attachments in your application depending on which criterion you're pursuing. And then those bulleted items at the bottom are various templates for the different required attachments or uploads depending on which criterion you are pursuing. So we've tried to make this simple for you. Please take a look at that website. Another source for you to access is our tools section of the website. So if you go to enterprisecommunity.org/green and then look on the right side of your browser, you'll see a link that simply says Tools. And if you go to that page, at the very top, you'll see a listing of these green tools. Farther down on the page will be tools produced by other departments of enterprise, but these top green tools are the ones that are most relevant to Green Communities criteria and certification. So again, you can find copies of the criteria manual here. You can find under the charrette tools section examples of agendas and guidelines for putting together an integrative design process. Under construction specs, you can find editable Word documents that are in master spec format that include all of our criterion, but are arranged in a way that's designed for you to be able to easily cut, copy, and paste into your bid documents. So take a look at that if you'd like. And then I'd like to call your attention to a few things farther down on this list. Under operations and maintenance, you'll find sample templates of the building maintenance manuals that are required for you to submit as part of Category 8. And under resident engagement, you'll find a similar items for a resident engagement manual. You'll also find lots of really excellent resources about how to cultivate green resident leaders and how to hold different workshops with residents on sustainability features and encourage different activities and signs and prompts and posters in your buildings that are all encouraged to either promote healthy living outcomes for residents or improved environmental outcomes with sustainability. So The very last link on this page is Technical Assistance Providers Database. So these are individuals or organizations that we have vetted and put up on this list because they've shown to us that they have excellent expertise both in a certain green building subject area, so it might be integrative design process, or it might be energy modeling, or it might be renewable energy, for instance, and these groups have experience working with the affordable housing sector. So if you're looking to work with an individual or an organization to provide a certain type of extra capacity to your team on any element that's associated with sustainability or green communities, please check out this database. You can filter it by location, or you can look at national organizations to find groups that you can contact to get additional support for your project. So please take a look at that. And if you're on the line and you're interested in becoming listed on this database, you can also click on this link to find information about the RFQ process that we have for evaluating firms to be placed on this list. We evaluate applications for interested organizations every quarter, and we actually have a deadline that's coming up. I believe it's tomorrow evening. So if you'd like to get into this quarter's round, you can submit your application by midnight tomorrow, and we'll take a look. So with that, I've shared information about the certification process at a high level and different resources that are available to you for successfully completing the certification process or different criterion measures. So I'll take a look again at what Q&A have come in, and we'll wrap up the session after that. All right, it looks like we do have some Q&A. First one is, what were the total mandatory requirements? Have the optional but missed the mandatory. So that's a great question. We have mandatory criterion requirements in every category of our criterion. So if you go to our website, for instance, and download either the manual or just the checklist version, the checklist version is easier for you to navigate if you're just trying to get an idea of that. But within each criterion, next to the title of the criterion, it either has an M for mandatory, or it says that it's optional and shows you the number of points that you could achieve if you're pursuing that criterion. Some criterion may also say they are mandatory only for new construction or only for rehabs, for instance, so take a look at that. I did not show a listing of just the mandatory criterion in today's slides, but if you take a look at that checklist, you can view within each category which ones you do have to follow or which ones are optional. All right, I'm going to give it another minute or two if you all have any other questions. One has come in. Who do we contact to correct errors listed in the TA provider registry? If you're listed there and you do see any errors, let me bring you to this slide. Please email that certification@enterprisecommunity.org address, and we'll get that taken care of for you. We certainly want to make sure we have correct information listed. So as you all might be thinking of some final questions here, I'll just remind you that a copy of this recording and the slides will be sent out to everyone that registered for this webinar within the next week. That deadline for pre-build submissions is August 10th for those of y'all that are following OFA's 9% LIHTC round this year. And please reach out to this email address, certification@enterprisecommunity.org, with any questions you may have about the criteria or the certification process. We'd be more than happy to talk with your team at any stage of your process about any questions or feedback you may have, and are really looking forward to working with you all later this year. So I haven't seen any additional Q&A come in, so I think we're going to wrap a little bit early. But please, again, feel free to reach out with questions if you have them. And thanks so much for joining today's webinar. And we'll see you online another time. Thank you.